Y'all can have a seat.
Oh my goodness. Good morning. What a beautiful morning for us to be together. Let's give another hand to our choir this morning. It is Kickoff Sunday, which is the kickoff of our Grove Kids programming and the kickoff of our new fall series and the kickoff of all of the things that come with fall and being able to do it on this crisp September morning supported by the choir is absolutely fantastic. My name's Jeremy. I'm the pastor of the Grove Cottage Grove, and we are a new church that exists to grow goodness. And so, however you're interacting with us this morning, whether you're in the room with us with all of this energy, whether you're watching with us online, whether you're somehow interacting with us during the week, somehow we hope that goodness is growing in and through you as a result of that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Miranda. I'm also one of the worship leaders here at the Grove. As you walked in, you may have seen that table there. There was a flyer, or you might have gotten it from Tammy at the front there as well. If you could take a look at it, on the inside, there is a little form. If you're new to the Grove, or if there's anything that you're interested in, if you want to fill that out, there's a basket in the back that you can drop it in. We always love to hear and see who's coming in and joining us. The other thing is that there's a few ways to give to the Grove here as well. On the inside, you'll see a couple different ways here. There's in-person, there's Venmo, there's online. We appreciate any donations that you guys can give.
So I say routinely, we're not here to talk about logistics, and sometimes logistics are important, especially when there's transitions going on. So as we move inside, as we kick off this fall season, that means that we are back inside, all of us, including our kids. And transitions are difficult, even for adults, but especially for kids who've been running around like crazy over the course of the summer. So as we make this transition, I would simply ask for all of us, and especially kids, grace abounds, right? This community would not exist without our kids. Our kids are celebrated, valued members of this church community. So what we've tried to do is build things within the physical worship space and then provide programs as well to meet the needs of those kids. So here in this worship space, if you're unfamiliar with it, we have the wiggle space on the side. If you've been in here before, you might notice the wiggle space is now twice as long because we have so many kids. I'm hoping it does not become a runway. In any case, it's a place where the kids can feel free to move their bodies a little bit rather than just sitting in one spot. If they do want to sit in one spot, we do have coloring activities in each of the pews. In the back of the pews, there are coloring sheets, and then there are baskets of crayons, enough in every single pew, so you don't need to be picking them up and moving them around. We also have programming for each of our kids as well to meet their needs of their ages. So we have a staffed nursery, which is right outside in the Commons area. The nursery is for kids who are 6 months through 3 years. There's obviously lots of nursery-related stuff in there. There's also a live stream of the service. So if your kid needs to go in there, or if you need to bring your kid into there, that is available to you. We also have Grove Kids for our older students. So our kids who are 4 years old through 5th grade. Just a little bit later in the service, we are going to sing them out to be able to go and play and learn with one another out in the Commons area. One thing, whether you are sending kids to nursery or to Grove Kids, that we would ask, and because this is a new ministry year, we ask this of everybody. The other thing that is in the pews right in front of you are these registration cards. Okay? We're going to ask every single person, whether you have been here all along or whether this is your first week, if you have kids who are going into either the nursery or to Grove Kids, please fill these out, one per family, and then send them with your kiddo as they go to their ministry area. And then after today, if you fill this out, you do not need to fill it out again. We will have these on file. 2 other things. Number 1 is, in order to pull off this program, we need a lot of dedicated volunteers. So at this point, I want all of our kids ministry volunteers to stand up so we can recognize you. Kids ministry volunteers, stand up. Let's give these current volunteers a hand. And this is an area where we are constantly trying to find new people to plug in because it is a growing area of our church. So if you value the kids ministry programs that we put on and you could see yourself serving once a month, once every 6 weeks in some capacity to be able to help to make sure that these programs continue to be available not only for the kids we have now, but for the ones arriving next, talk to Chelsea. Chelsea's back there on the stool, or as you fill out your worship insert, you can check off children's ministry, and we will be in touch with you about that. Okay, lots of logistics.
Yeah, now we get to talk. Unless you're an introvert and then you don't want to, but we're going to make you. So this is a time where we can all get together and kind of just get to know one another a little bit deeper. We're going to do our question of the day. What do we call it?
Connection point.
Connection point. Not word of the day. So connection point question for today is, what is your sports food go-to? So like if you're doing a baseball or if you're football, what is that one food group, whether it's a dessert, chili, hot dogs, that is your go-to food during sports games? Break.
Find somebody near you you don't know very well, introduce yourself, discuss that question.
now y'all don't talk about food too much. We're going to be starving. We're not going to be able to focus during the message because we're all going to be thinking about food. All right, y'all. Well, as a reminder, when we send our kids out to Grove Kids Time, this is so they can have time that's appropriate for them. We can have a little bit more quiet focus time in here. Of course, kids are welcome to be in here. Nobody's kicking them out or anything. But we sing a little song together as a congregation to sort of sing a blessing over them and show our kids that we love and support them. And that's also their transition out. So while we sing our little song together, the choir and the band is going to come back up, and our kids, except the choir kids, the other kids are going to go to Grove Kids. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Every color, shape, and type, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Beautiful. All right, y'all just get settled and hang out for a minute. We're going to do something special today. Today, of course, marks the beginning of a new season for us in our worship and a new season for our prayer wall as well, which if you've never really noticed or taken a look, that is around on the other side of the choir over there, our prayer wall. We instituted that last year as a part of our communal prayer practice. And as you can see, something I noticed this year is last year's prayers added and grew on this board kind of like leaves on a tree. Very on brand. Much like leaves on a tree, an actual tree this time of year, it's time for them to come down. But we didn't want to just take our prayers down and like throw them in the trash, because these are special, right? These are precious to us. These are bits and pieces of all of our hearts that are held up here. So we want to acknowledge the importance of those prayers and in our lives over the last year, and also make room for more new prayers. So our idea is we're going to remove those today and leave room to add more prayers over the coming years. And again, we're not going to just throw them away. We're going to take them and turn them into seed paper and then give them back to you all at some point in case anybody wants to plant some in your garden this fall. So I'm actually going to ask for spontaneous participation from one or two people in the congregation to come remove the prayers. So if there's an adult that is tall enough to reach the top, and then maybe a kid or a shorter adult that can reach the ones on the bottom, Zach's come in. Yeah, we could do two. Y'all go ahead and gather those up. Thank you. And as you gather them, you actually can bring them to Jeremy. Jeremy's going to come up here too. And while you're removing them, I'm going to read sort of a blessing over these prayers. God, who is with us through it all, we know you hold these prayers as tightly as we do. You have seen hopes come to fruition. You have held us in our heartache. You remain suspended with us in our questions and in our longings. We remove and release a whole year's worth of grief, anticipation, worry, and joy. We trust that you can use whatever is on these papers to grow goodness. Now y'all can bring those to Jeremy.
When did you come up with this? Sometime this last week, right? Spontaneously. I'm feeling now like the heaviness of these things that have accumulated over the last year. These are a big deal. Things that in the last year we have grieved and celebrated, or maybe done both over at different times. We now have an open wall for a year that is to come, with all of those other grievings that we might be having now, all of those other celebrations that we might be having now, all of those things that are going to happen over the next 12 months. And so I encourage you over the next 12 months, at any point, before the service, during the service, after the service, to make use of this wall. We often say when we're in smaller groups, we ask the question, how is it with your soul? And sometimes our souls are really good and there's great things to share. And other times our souls are not so great. And we have things to share along with that as well. Consider this that space where you can share those things, where we can communally pray over them. If you do not yourself have anything to share, you can also feel free to go up there, look at them, read them, and then you can pray over them as well at any time.
So I'll read one final prayer over these, a prayer for prayers, which seems kind of silly, but and then we'll sing a song. And during this song, if anybody is aching to get up there and try it out, go for it. Sometimes people need a place to kneel, so we've provided some pillows if you need a place to kneel. There's paper and pens up there to write things down. There's some candles that haven't been lit yet. If you come from a tradition where when you pray, you light a candle, you can do that. Hopefully the candles will work for you. So use that space as you need it. And here's our prayer for those. God, we offer a new season of prayers raised to you and to our community. Thank you for listening. Help us also to listen. May we move forward in hope. Amen.
Bring your weary bones, tired from the load. There's rest for you here. Bring your hurt there's rest for you here. We all belong here.
I said during rehearsal, I wasn't prepared to cry today. Knock it off. Ugh. Bring your whole selves, right? Okay, we're going to do a hard pivot before I completely lose it. It's Kickoff Sunday. It's not only Kickoff Sunday here at the Grove, but it's Kickoff Sunday in the NFL. Okay, so we've got Chiefs. I decided to go neutral. I didn't do Packers, didn't do Vikings. I went with Priest Holmes with the Chiefs. We've got Falcons, 2 Falcons jerseys, right? Where'd he go? He's out there. Packers, Vikings, any other NFL team? Oh, Broncos. Okay. I think that's all the teams represented. So in addition to being NFL Kickoff Sunday, more importantly for many people, it is Kickoff Sunday for fantasy football. Any fantasy football players out there? Okay, yeah. That's a good number. So I kind of assume that people know what fantasy football is, and yet I, in this last week, had to try to explain to my 3 kids what fantasy football was. And after all these years, I think that it makes sense and is intuitive. And as I was describing it to them, they're like eyes glazed over, and then they just walked out of the room. So maybe it's not that intuitive, and maybe if you out there don't play it, you're not familiar with it. So I'm going to really briefly try to describe what it is and why people get so excited about it. So imagine that you are an owner of a team, and you can choose any players in the whole league to be on your team. And however those players do in their actual games, your team gets points for how they perform, okay? So this is fantasy football. You don't just have to have your one team. You're a Vikings fan. It's all Vikings players. You get the opportunity to choose to collect all of the players that you think are going to be the best players, are going to perform the best week over week for 17 weeks or however long the season is now. On top of that, one of the things that people get really excited about, sometimes more excited than the actual playing, is the fantasy football drafts. Because it's many leagues, like you're getting a whole new team every single year, and so there's this excitement and anticipation about being able to sit there and figure out what team you're going to end up with for that season, right? I have been a fantasy football player since I was growing up in the 90s. I remember in our small church in rural northwest Wisconsin, we would get together for the NFL drafts, and we didn't have internet to be able to do that type of stuff, so we had our catalogs. Every year there'd be a catalog with, these are the best fantasy football players, and we all sit around these tables and we'd open up our catalogs and figure out what the professionals said would be best, and then assemble our team like that. Every single week then throughout the year, we would show up on Sunday mornings at church, and we had like a roster sheet and a physical bulletin board where we'd have to write out our team for that week, who our starters were, and then post it on that bulletin board, and then see who we were playing against and track it like that. Now, of course, there's all sorts of websites to be able to do things like that. All that is to say, I've played fantasy football for decades at this point. Well, a few weeks ago, I decided that I was going to be hanging up my fantasy football cleats, that I just didn't have like the bandwidth or the attention anymore to figure out what was going on. And so I'd been in this one league with some friends for about 10 years, and I told them, I'm stepping out, I can't do it anymore. About 5 days later, I get a text message from another friend who says, would you like to be in our fantasy football league, and would you like to come to this draft party in person? And like I said, some people get more excited about the draft than the actual league itself. So it took me about 4 hours to finally respond, him and hot, and then finally I said, count me in. So last Monday, Labor Day, I packed up my iPad and a tray of watermelon and a bag of s'moreos, hopped in my car and drove to my friend's house about 45 minutes from here. And walked in the door. And have you ever been in a room where you walk in and everybody stares at you? This was worse than that. Because I walked in and nobody looked up at me at all. Nobody even acknowledged that I was there. So I walked in, took off my shoes, just kind of stood there. Nobody's acknowledging me at all. And then finally I decided to break the tension. And I'm like, hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm the ringer. Thanks for including me. And there were some head nods and then they went back down. My friend who'd been in his backyard grilling, he came in and we had a good conversation. But then the rest of the night, we were there for like 3.5 hours for this draft. I probably said like another 30 words the rest of the night. And I don't say that because like I don't want you to look down on the people who were there or on my friend who was hosting. He did just fine job hosting. But it was clear from the moment that I walked in that this gathering was not for me, right? I was invited to it. It's not that they were hostile to me, but they shaped it in such a way and responded in such a way that, yeah, I was invited and I was technically welcome, but it was clearly not for me. Now, again, I don't say that like so that you can have a pity party for me about not feeling welcome at this fantasy football draft or for you to look down on these people who were there. But just to reiterate, we got to be really, really intentional when we create gatherings for people and we say, you are welcome, you are invited. It takes a lot of intentionality for us to be able to create space when we are gathering people together. So that is what we're going to be talking about over the next 6 weeks. We are doing this series called Crowded Table. The tagline is Room for Everyone, and we're going to be asking this question about what it looks like and what it requires for us to actually create space, create room where everyone is invited and welcomed in. And in order to do that, we are going to be looking at one of the 4 biographies about the life of Jesus, the Gospel according to Luke. Just like any book that's written, any biography that is written, each book is a little bit different based on the situation and who the author is and what message they're trying to convey. It's not just straight history. An author writes something for a purpose in order to try to get some sort of reaction, right? So this is true of each of the 4 biographies that we have about the life of Jesus. And Luke, the person who wrote the Gospel according to Luke was historically a physician, and he says from the get-go as he's writing that he's trying to put together an orderly account so that people can be sure of what happened. And so he is retelling the stories of Jesus in this way. Luke is also a non-Jew, and he's writing primarily to non-Jews. Jesus was a Jew himself. His followers were largely Jewish people themselves, and yet Luke, having experienced this Jesus guy and this way of living in the world that Jesus offered, retold the stories in such a way that maybe non-Jewish people could better understand it and be included in it as well. And so he actually lays it out and says, he writes like if you're writing a letter, it'd be to so-and-so. He writes his account to a guy named Theophilus. Theophilus means lover of God. Now, it could be that he's writing to an actual person, but it's more likely that he's including anyone who would consider themselves a lover of God, whether or not they are Jewish or Gentile or whatever. Anyone who considers themselves lovers of God, these are the things that you need to know about this Jesus person and what his way of living in the world was like. Now, one of the most important things at this time in the religious section of this time was people saying, you know what, one of the best and most important things that we can do is we can focus on being righteous, doing all the right things, and we can focus on being pure. Righteousness and purity. One of the best ways to make sure that you are righteous and you are pure is to stay away from people who are unrighteous and are impure. And one of the best ways to stay away from people who are unrighteous and impure is to not have meals with them. Meals get messy. Things get exchanged. You have to sit in really close proximity and have close conversation with people. And so at this time, the table fellowship, as it was termed, was really tight-knit because you didn't want to do it with people who were seen as unrighteous or impure. And yet, this Luke, who is writing this biography about the life of Jesus, rewriting it in such a way that kind of blows the doors open to who is welcome and who is included, tells the majority of Jesus' stories around tables. The teachings and the stories of Jesus in Luke's account happen largely around tables where Jesus is interacting with people who many would consider unrighteous or impure. And one of those stories that we're going to kick off with today happens in Luke chapter 5. It's going to be up here on the screen behind me so you can follow along. After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. "Follow me," he said. And he got up and followed him, leaving everything behind. Then Levi gave a great banquet in his house for Jesus, and there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others sitting at the table with them. But the Pharisees and their experts in the law complained to his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "Those who are well don't need a physician, but those who are sick do. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." There's this author named Priya Parker. Priya Parker is the author of a book called The Art of Gathering, and she's like a facilitator about helping people to gather well. So in her book, The Art of Gathering, she tries to lay out these principles that are like, when you are forming a gathering, these are the things that you consider to make sure it's a really good gathering of people. Some of these things include who's invited, where it happens, and why you're gathering. Seems really simple, right? Really obvious, right? This is not how most gatherings happen, though. Most gatherings happen because this is like the way these types of gatherings have always happened. And so you go into a gathering, maybe like a fantasy football draft, and you don't consider about who is coming or where it is happening or what the purpose is, why it is happening. You just do the same thing because that's the way that it's always been done. This is the case in the 21st century in many of our gatherings, and it was the case in the first century as well. And into this, Jesus says, all these conventions that we're supposed to follow, I don't care about them at all because I am about putting on a good gathering for the right group of people. So when we look at this story, and we're going to see this throughout the stories that we go through over the next 6 weeks, Jesus is being really intentional about the who, the where, and the why of the gatherings that he is attending or hosting. So we start with this story that we just read, the who. Jesus goes to a man named Levi, who is a tax collector, and he invites Levi to follow him. Levi stands up, leaves everything behind, decides to follow Jesus, and then Levi goes and throws a party for Jesus because he's so excited about what's happening. And then a bunch of Levi's tax collector friends show up as well. Last week, we actually talked a little bit about tax collectors, and Trevor gave this fantastic story of like displaying what it looked like. If you weren't there, just as a quick reminder, 2 things to know about tax collectors in the first century. Number 1, tax collectors worked with the Roman Empire, the enemies. They worked with them, they collaborated with them in order to collect taxes for the empire. Okay, not great. That wasn't highly looked upon. But number 2, what's more, they collected more than what they needed. They were able to take like a service fee off the top, so they would collect more from their friends and neighbors and relatives, and then they would keep that for themselves to enrich themselves. So people like Levi and the tax collectors weren't very popular. They may have been rich, but they weren't very popular. If you were thinking about gathering with someone and worrying about righteousness and purity, Tax collectors were exactly the ones that you wanted to avoid. This is strike number one for Jesus. So that's the who. But then there's the where. Where is this happening? Levi goes back to his house, and he invites Jesus to come to his house along with all of these other tax collectors. Relating with thieves, like being around thieves, not a very popular thing. Getting really comfy in a thieves' den, really not an unpopular, or really an unpopular thing. Strike number 2 against Jesus. So then there's number 3. Why? Why this type of gathering? And the Pharisees, the experts in the law, the religious leaders at the time, they see the who, they see the where, and they ask Jesus' followers directly, why? Why are you willing to eat with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus overhears this, and it is Jesus who responds, why? These are my people. These people know that they don't have it all put together. These people understand grace because they know that they need it. This Levi responded to me because he knew that he needed something in his life. The other tax collectors, they responded because they were able to see Levi's response as well. Why am I gathering with these folks instead of people like you? It's because they recognize grace, they recognize the need for other people, they recognize that they don't have it all put together. These are my people. Back to Priya Parker. This is what Priya Parker calls generous exclusion. I want to argue that Jesus was excluding people here. You won't often hear that from me. It seems like even in this story, Jesus is going to these people who are constantly excluded, and he's the one who's going and hanging out with them. Isn't Jesus including here? Isn't he like expanding his circle of inclusion? Yes, and it's apparent that this gathering that he is at Levi's house is not for everybody. And not everybody is going to be happy when they're there. This is what Priya Parker says about generous exclusion. When I talk about generous exclusion, I am speaking of ways of bounding a gathering that allow the diversity in it to be heightened and sharpened rather than diluted in a hodgepodge of people. Specificity sharpens the gathering because people can see themselves in it. This gathering that Jesus was in at Levi's house, everybody would have been invited in. Everybody would have been welcomed. But the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the experts, the religious people were making it clear they weren't interested in what was being offered there. And so what we actually see in many of these situations is Jesus is like thinning the crowd because he's focusing on the people who actually need it. He's focusing on the who and the where and the why that are going to make other people feel excluded. And Jesus is totally fine with that. Because those are the people who do not recognize need, they do not recognize grace, they think they have it all put together. They are welcome, but really that type of gathering is not for them. So 4.5 years ago, we moved here to Cottage Grove with nothing more than an idea in our mind for a new church start that eventually became this, the Grove, Cottage Grove. And as it was just this idea in the back of my mind, I was trying to think through, well, what kind of church do we want to have? What kind of church would I actually want to attend as well? And so this thing that kept coming into my mind was this idea of creating a faith community for those who felt like they needed to leave the church or never felt welcomed in the first place. And that could include lots of different people, right? So that can include LGBTQ people and their allies and their families who felt like they were being excluded or not welcome within the church doors. That could include people who, they had certain views of science and certain ways of understanding God that maybe they had really big questions and they were thinking like, oh, I got to drop my brain at the door before I walk in. There were people maybe who were really interested in a church or a faith community, but the experience that they had, they're like, this doesn't mean anything to me. This doesn't have any implication to my everyday life. Or it could include people who were like brand new to it and open to it, but it's just so foreign and difficult to understand that it was made clear to them like, this is clearly not for me. So this is like the driving vision that I had for this new church start. And it seemed like it was really expansive and inclusive, right? But the closer we got, the more this thing became formed, the more that we talked about our gatherings even, and what this thing was going to look like, the who, the where, and the why, the more I got questions like, well, what if I'm not one of those people? That doesn't sound like me. Why are you doing it differently than how we've always done it before? And at that point I realized, actually, we're doing a little bit of generous exclusion, aren't we? And I had to get to the point where I was okay with that, because we were so convinced that we were focusing on the who, the where, and the why of the people that we were truly called to, those who felt like they were like they had to leave the church or never felt welcomed in the first place, that I was then able to go to these people who had questions and felt excluded and say, I understand why you might feel that, and maybe that means this church isn't for you. You're welcome here. Everyone is welcome here. And maybe this is not for you. And if that's the case, I would love to help you find a place that works for you. But we are going to stay focused on who we are called to be focused on. And so as we enter into this new season, as we enter into this new series, as we enter into this phase of being a church, as we continue to try to grow this church, may we do so with a crowded table of a bunch of spiritual misfits, those who are both already here and those who have yet to arrive. So, may that be so.
This is a song that we started doing from the very get-go when we started meeting for weekly worship inside a couple years ago. It's one that's continued to be a part of our worship. It's one that, funny enough, is not technically, by music business standards, a Christian music song, but also it definitely is a Christian song. So if y'all know it, please rise and let's join our voices together for Crowded Table. You can hold my hand when you need to let go. I can be your mountain when you're feeling valley low. I can be your street light, showing you the way home. You can hold my
I'm up here to announcements. We're going to end with a postlude, so you're not going to end with me doing announcements. Don't worry. You're going to get more of that as we walk out from here. If you have your worship handouts, just want to direct your attention to the back for the 3 things that we're really focusing in on this month as we transition into fall. Number 1, in addition to being the name of our current series, the fall is also a time where we focus on stewardship campaign, which is where we are saying, what kind of commitment are you able and willing to make to the church for the year ahead? You're going to be hearing much more about that in the weeks ahead, so I'm not going to go into that too much. If you want more about that, though, you can scan the QR code and read more about that, and even make a pledge if you're ready to do that now. The second thing is about becoming a partner. Becoming a partner simply means that you consider this to be your church home, and you are ready to make that commitment through giving of your prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. What that means is that you are praying for this church and the community that we are in. That you are choosing to be here on Sundays is important for you, but it's important for the rest of this community as well. That you give something regularly to make sure we are continuing to be able to do this. Prayers, presence, gifts, service. That you find a volunteer role that you can get plugged into to contribute to the life of the church. And then witness, that you are willing to share your story about your own experience of God's grace and or this church. Maybe both of them overlap together. If you're interested in learning more about being a partner, you can scan that QR code as well to learn more about that and even to sign up. And then the last thing is Pop-Up Pumpkin Patch. We're like a month away from this, folks. 3,800 people who have shown interest on Facebook. It is all coming together, and we will take whatever hands-on help we can get. So if you follow that QR code, you will be able to go and sign up for a role. Again, we'd love to be able to plug you in somewhere. It can be as simple as helping set up or tearing down, being a floater. You can help with activities and being around people or not. We just need as much help as we can get to be able to pull off this event, which is our biggest and most important of the year. Okay, so with that, I already have you standing. I'll have you extend your hands to receive this blessing as we go out from here. As we begin this new series and this new season, may we continue to grow our church. May we do so with a crowded table of spiritual misfits, both those who are already here and those who are arriving next. May that be so.